first pictures of the B-29 Superfortress, the biggest, fastest bombing plane in the world. Within 2 weeks following Allied landings in France, and 1 day after Allied landings at Saipan, 1,500 miles from Tokyo, a force of these flying dreadnoughts took off from an unnamed base in China. They struck at Yawata, the center of 1/5 of Japanese steel production. So powerful is this new giant of the skies that a worldwide aerial organization, the 20th Air Force, will operate the superfortresses under the command of the combined chiefs of staff. In order to reach their bases in China, the planes flew from India across the hump over dread Himalayan peaks towering 20,000 feet into the air. Here in the clouds, at the last stop before Kunming, China, engineers of the Chinese Army have set up landing strips. The almost complete lack of modern equipment has not stopped the Chinese in the crucial job of constructing these airfields. Dwarfing the mighty Fortress and Liberator to medium bomber status, the 8,800 horsepower Superfortress is a global weapon for global warfare. In northern Burma, on the road to China, is the strategic Jap-held city of Myitkyina. 2 miles to its south is Myitkyina airstrip, key to the capture of this stronghold. United States transports and gliders head for the field taken just hours before by Chinese and American troops. Aboard these big ships, Chinese reinforcements and American airborne engineers ride together with tractors and other air base equipment. Below is the rough shell and bomb-pocked Myitkyina strip, still under enemy fire, where the heavily loaded gliders must land. Watch this glider. Coming in fast and low, it heads for what appears to be an unavoidable collision on the closely packed field. The gliders unload. Some of these troops will stay to guard and recondition the airstrip, but most will push on to take the city of Myitkyina. Uncle Joe's chariot brings General Joseph W. Stilwell to the field. He confers with General Frank Merrill, whose marauders took the Myitkyina strip after an epic 25-day mountain march through Jap line. Our planes, some of them wrecked in landing, dot the airbase. Jap opposition continues from the air. An enemy plane comes over to attack the field. Saipan Island in the Marianas, great Jap stronghold just 1,500 miles southeast of Tokyo. Here, American carrier-based planes land at recently captured Aslito airstrip, now renamed Conroy Field. For 3.5 weeks, planes, ships, guns, and men have fought fiercely in the greatest land battle of the Pacific theater to date. The carrier planes gas up for action. Nearing the final stages of the campaign, fighters and bombers take off to smash the Japs in the northern tip of the 75-square-mile island. Smoke billows from a Jap ammunition dump hit by our bombs. On Hill 500, north of Conroy Field, Lieutenant Colonel Evans Carlson, famed Marine Raider commander, sees the progress of the battle as United States mechanized equipment and men move up in force against the enemy. Marine and Army divisions, backed up by Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher's Task Force 58, must complete the annihilation of 20,000 Japanese troops on Saipan. mortar shells to be dumped on deeply entrenched Japs, fighting back from pillboxes and steel-doored caves on the island. Hit on a Jap cave as relentlessly United States guns clear the path for our advancing forces. In the battle for Saipan, 2,360 Americans were killed. For the Japs, there were 19,000 dead in this action. Capture of Saipan, the Allies are now within 2,000 miles of Tokyo, the Philippines, and Formosa. Typical of the Marines and soldiers who won one of the war's great victories at Saipan, these Yanks have demonstrated once again that as individuals and as combat units, they are more than a match for the Japs. United States Supreme Court Justice Jackson swears in Vice President Sergio Osmeña as the new president of the Philippine Commonwealth. Congratulated by his daughter, Senor Osmeña signs his oath of office as successor to the late Manuel Quezon. Last rites in Washington for Quezon, beloved leader of his people. He died at 65, temporarily exiled in the United States. Full military honors for a gallant statesman and soldier, and staunch friend of the United States. Ten years ago, the Philippines became a republic, and Manuel Quezon its first president. And then in February 1942, the Japanese overran his country, and he escaped by submarine. His great dream to return there with MacArthur now cut short by death. Arrival at Arlington Cemetery, where the body of Manuel Quezon will lie until the enemy has been driven from the Philippines, and he can rest permanently in his beloved native soil. For 17 days without let-up, American planes and ships assault the island of Guam in the Marianas, 5,000 miles from San Francisco, 1,500 miles from Tokyo and Manila. Now, a shattering zero-hour bombardment by the combined forces. Assembled for attack, most of the Navy's 5th Fleet and ships of the United States 3rd Amphibious Group. A mighty striking force, superbly equipped in manpower and materiel, and in the accumulated experience of a dozen previous major invasions since the Great Pacific Offensive began. Landing barges and amphibious tractors streamed toward shore, bearing first-wave Marine landing troops. Exactly 31 months and 9 days from the date of Japanese conquest, the return to Guam. PC boats accompany the assault wave, their guns pounding the shore. In close now, enemy fire is heavy. 3 landing craft are hit. Strength, troops and equipment strike for the beach. In 3.5 hours of fierce fighting, Marines gain a toehold on Guam's western shore. American flag on the beachhead. A wounded Marine fights on. Light artillery comes up to support the advance elements, fighting inland ahead of schedule with flamethrower, rifle, grenade, and machine gun. Jap installations wrecked by the fury of the combined offensive. With the control of Guam, American forces have now acquired an invaluable base, only 5 bomber hours from the Philippines and Japan. Generals Geiger, Turnage, and Noble inspect frontline positions on Guam. The retaking of strategic territory in the Pacific continues. Mindanao in the Philippines. United States Navy fighters and bombers in clashing low-level attacks on Japanese shipping in Mindanao Harbor. Clearing a fiery way for the liberation of the Philippines, 18 ships were sunk, 19 damaged in this raid alone. An anti-aircraft tower is blasted. Enemy planes are hit. Japanese airfields on Mindanao and other land installations are plowed up by explosives. 70 Japanese planes destroyed. An early taste of the full fury to be unleashed on the enemy in the Philippines. fulfilling operations in the Philippines, striking first at Leyte Island, have now been undertaken by the largest ocean-going amphibious force in history, led by Admiral Halsey. Here are General Jonathan Wainwright and some of his men who were captured in the Japanese invasion of the Philippines 2.5 years ago. They are still prisoners. But now, fulfilling his pledge to the Filipino people, General Douglas MacArthur has returned, accompanied by overpowering military strength and by every able-bodied man who, under orders, left the Philippines with him. The Marshall Islands, first territory of Japan's pre-war empire to be invaded by United States forces. A 700-mile group of atolls bristling with Jap air and sea bases. Most important of these is Kwajalein, the Marshall strategic heart. Roy and Namur are taken by United States Marines, Kwajalein by the Army. These pictures show the Army invasion. Ships of Admiral Turner's giant task force stand offshore. The pre-invasion bombardment nears its devastating conclusion. Kwajalein's 2.5 miles is hit again and again. Tiny island just west of Kwajalein, United States artillery pounds the objective at almost point-blank range. Piles of empty shell cases indicate the ferocity of the barrage. Now scores of landing craft bring the troops ashore. They drive in for the decisive assault. The patches on their backs are to identify them to their own low-flying aircraft. Machine gunners get a Jap sniper in a tree. Mortar fire is constant, devastating. It drives the enemy further back. A Japanese pillbox is blasted by dynamite. Riflemen cover any possible escape. Flamethrowers finish off a Jap military building. The Americans push ahead. All arms keep up relentless pressure on the enemy. With a loudspeaker, an American officer speaking in Japan with a Kwajalein chicken. Admiral Nimitz, Pacific Fleet Commander, and Lieutenant General Richardson, Army Commander, visit the scene of battle. At the highest point on Kwajalein, the American flag is raised. Under Admiral Nimitz, the United States moves ahead in the Battle of the Pacific.